spring is definitely in the air. And, well, you really can't miss all the Easter stuff, can you? The pastels, the bunnies, everything.
It's everywhere.
It really is. And it's a holiday so many of us celebrate. But, have you ever stopped to actually dig into where all these traditions come from?
Mm.
Because today we've got some really interesting material. It's an audio source that really pulls apart the usual story of Easter. Makes you question, its connection to Christian beliefs.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about this source right from the get-go is the challenge it throws down. It's not just accepting Easter as, okay, celebrating the resurrection.
Right.
It's suggesting this pretty significant link to ancient pagan practices.
Okay.
So our mission really in this deep dive is to unpack those arguments, look at the historical claims it's making, and just try to understand the different ways you can look at Easter's origins and what it all means.
Okay, so let's start with what Easter looks like now. For most people, you've got the baby chicks, the bunnies,
The cute animals, yeah.
kids hunting for colorful eggs, maybe a sunrise service on Sunday morning for some. It's quite a mix.
It is, and the source notes correctly that for Roman Catholics, Easter Sunday is like the biggest deal in their church year. Their whole liturgical calendar kind of builds up to
Really
it.
fun point.
Exactly. The Catechism calls it the Feast of Feasts. That tells you how important it is.
Right.
And historically, you see this weight everywhere. St. Athanasius called it the Great Sunday. Eastern churches talk about Holy Week as the Great Week. It's all about the resurrection being central.
And here's the twist from the source, right?
Yeah.
It argues these things we do now, they aren't originally Christian, that they flow directly from ancient paganism. That's quite a statement.
It's a very strong claim. And the source tries to lay out the specific lineage, connecting modern Easter way back. It starts after the flood with Nimrod.
Nimrod. Okay.
Presented as the guy who kind of reestablished idol worship and then gets promoted to being the original sun god. And his widow, Semiramis, she's then called the Queen of Heaven. The source argues her worship just kept going in different cultures, just under different names.
So like a pagan family tree, Semiramis becomes Isis in Egypt, Beltis in Babylon, Astarte, Ishtar.
Exactly. It's like tracing this one core idea through different civilizations. And the source really leans into the kind of worship involved.
That's right.
It talks about occult fertility practices, degrading rites. And interestingly, it claims even the ancient Israelites got caught up in this stuff during periods of apostasy. It mentions Yahweh condemning these practices.
Okay, and it gives specific examples.
Yeah, it brings up the prophet Jeremiah mentioning people baking cakes for this Queen of Heaven and also weeping for Tammuz, another figure.
Weeping for Tammuz.
And then it draws a straight line, basically, saying these ancient things. They echo in modern Easter.
So, wait, like the hot cross buns?
Uh-huh. The source says those are basically the modern version of the cakes for the Queen of Heaven.
Wow, okay.
Mhm.
What else?
Well, the rabbits and the dyed eggs, linked to fertility symbols from paganism. The 40 days of Lent. That's supposedly connected to the weeping for Tammuz.
40 days.
Tammuz.
And even sunrise services are framed as honoring the sun god.
So the source isn't just saying there are similarities. It's claiming celebrating Easter is like fundamentally honoring Satan, even if we put Christian names on it. That's whoa.
It's a very provocative argument, yeah. And it gets even more complex. The source then claims Easter is essentially a cover-up for the greatest fraud of all time, a calendar change.
A calendar change. How does that fit in?
The argument is this change was deliberately made to hide the real day Jesus was resurrected
Yeah.
and also to hide the original seventh-day Sabbath.
Okay, hold on. So the idea is the church in Rome wanted more power.
Uh-huh.
So they messed with the calendar to merge Christian and pagan holidays, making it easier to convert pagans.
That's precisely the argument, that Rome wanted to grow its influence, so it adjusted the calendar, blended these festivals to kind of, appease and attract pagans. And this wasn't just a minor tweak.
No, the source calls it the introduction of grossest corruption and the rankest superstition into the church. It even tries to link this alleged manipulation to things like April Fool's Day and, bizarrely, CERN, suggesting this calendar thing is an ongoing deception.
Okay, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And this calendar change,
Mm-hmm.
it also affected the day of worship.
Yes, that's central. The source claims it shifted worship from Saturday, which it identifies as the biblical seventh-day Sabbath, to Sunday.
And it blames the Catholic Church for this.
Directly. It says Sunday observance is purely a creation of the Catholic Church. It even quotes a Catholic bishop apparently saying the church made the Sunday law long after the Bible was written.
So the implication is, If you're a Protestant keeping Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
you're doing it because the Catholic Church said so, not because the Bible dictates it. That's the source's argument.
Okay, what else? It mentioned Passover, too.
Right. The source claims that the original Israelite festival of Passover was basically outlawed in favor of Easter.
Yeah. It says early Christians actually kept Passover, like it's described in Leviticus. But then around the 2nd century AD, a split happened.
About when to celebrate.
Exactly. When to remember Christ's death and resurrection, the Paschal anniversary. One group stuck to the 14th, 15th, 16th of the lunar month, Passover timing.
Following the moon.
Right. But the bishops in Rome pushed for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday after the 14th day of the lunar month.
And this wasn't a quick decision.
No, the source says this argument raged for nearly 200 years until Emperor Constantine stepped in.
And he sided with?
With Rome, effectively banning the other practice, the one tied directly to the Passover date.
So the source frames this as a big showdown, Passover versus Easter.
Absolutely, with huge issues at stake, especially about using the biblical lunar solar calendar. Because remember, the source claims the Sabbath was also calculated using the moon.
Okay. So fixing Easter to a specific day of the week, like Sunday, based on the Roman calendar, would automatically mess with a moon-based Sabbath calculation.
That's the connection it makes. The churches in Asia that resisted Rome's way were called heretics, the 14th day heresy. The key point for the source is that Easter became intentionally disconnected from any Jewish way of calculating time.
So pulling that thread, the source argues Sunday became the main worship day because of Easter Sunday, because that's when they believe the resurrection happened.
Pretty much. But then it adds another layer. It says, okay, so people assume Saturday must be the Sabbath now, but the Jewish calendar used today isn't the same one from Bible times, according to the source.
It changed.
The claim is that originally the new moon and the Sabbath depended on the lunar cycle. The source even says some Jewish scholars admit their calendar changed because of persecution after the Council of Nicaea.
Nicaea again?
Yeah, the council's decisions on time calculation supposedly led to Rome forbidding the Jewish Sanhedrin from declaring month based on citing the moon, maybe starting on the 4th century, a forced change.
So this Council of Nicaea sounds like ground zero for the source's argument.
Very much so. It's painted as the moment Christianity stepped free of its biblical roots by swapping pagan Easter for Passover, like cutting the cord connecting Christianity to Judaism.
And Constantine is key here, too.
Definitely. The source includes a statement attributed to him, basically saying he didn't want Christians following detestable Jewish customs for Easter.
He actually said that, or the source claims he did.
The source presents it that way. That Constantine argued the Savior showed a different path, and it was absurd for Christians to depend on Jewish rules. He wanted a complete break.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up the source's main points.
Yeah.
It's saying Easter is a fraud.
Not the resurrection day.
Saturday isn't the original Sabbath.
Right.
Easter is really a pagan fertility holiday that replaced Passover because Rome, pushed by Constantine at Nicaea, rejected Hebrew timekeeping. Is that about right?
That's the core argument, yes. And then it
Yep.
pivots to a kind of call to action. It suggests that in the last generation, this hidden truth is being restored. And if you really want to honor the Savior, you should do it on Passover, calculated by the original calendar of creation.
And if you celebrate Easter instead.
The source claims any other observance honors Satan. It puts a really stark choice to the listener. Passover or Easter? Savior or Satan? Which power do you worship?
Wow. Okay, well, this deep dive certainly went into some unexpected places. This source presents a view of Easter that's probably very different from what most people understand.
Definitely. It's laid out a very detailed case, controversial for sure, but detailed, about pagan origins, calendar changes, Passover being replaced.
It really forces you, the listener, to acknowledge that this perspective exists, and it challenges some very, very deeply rooted traditions.
Yeah, the historical claims, the interpretations, it's a completely different lens to view Easter through.
So it really leaves you with questions to think about. What do you make of these claims? Does this perspective change how you think about Easter or about Sunday worship or your own traditions?
And maybe one last thing to chew on. If the origins of something as widespread as Easter could be this complex, this debated, well, what other things that we just accept might have more tangled roots than we think?
That's a great point. It definitely encourages staying curious, doesn't it? Keep digging into the why behind the things we observe.
Absolutely. Keep exploring.